So every year we have come to expect a refresh to the base iPads, and around this time of the year we get leaks about the next generation model, but surprisingly there's been nothing regarding the iPad 11, and so let's theorize on what to expect with this refresh. Now I do want to begin by saying, guys, I was wrong, and so was a lot of the tech community about the iPad 10, because we all thought this would flop because it was overpriced, but that's actually not been the case. This refresh has single-handedly boosted Apple's market share for tablets in the US. They've gone from 38% to 50%, which is a substantial increase. And so it seems, even with the higher price, the new design and fun colors have resonated with consumers, though the sad part about this news is that many of the compromises we complained about will likely never be fixed. For example, the biggest issue I had with the iPad 10 that of course many pointed out was the lack of Apple Pencil 2 support. It continued to use Apple Pencil 1, but because it had a Type-C port, you had to use a stupid dongle to charge it, and it was a complete mess that put me off this iPad. However, the fact that this iPad still sold well regardless means that most consumers can unfortunately look past this, and so I'm very sure this year's base iPad is going to continue supporting Apple Pencil 1, especially when most consumers clearly don't care about the stupid charging methods. Apple would rather differentiate the range and stick to the older Pencil for this iPad. Plus they have the landscape camera that of course takes up the space needed for the charging strip. And by the way, would like to remind you guys, like this video and subscribe for more content like this, it would be appreciated. The other aspect people complained about was the lack of a laminated panel. Now this has been a staple of all budget iPads since their conception, and I don't see this changing anytime soon. Now to be fair, when using the iPad 10 I thought the air gap was not that apparent anymore, so this personally does not bother me, and do remember that non-laminated panels are cheaper to repair, which is a key factor for schools and parents since kids break things pretty easily. And so now you may be wondering what exactly is changing with the iPad 11. Well, as I said, there's been no concrete leaks, even though we do usually get some tidbits around this time of the year, and actually credible leaker Mark Gurman has told us we might only get simple spec refreshes to the iPad range, or maybe no new models this year because we're in a recession and so companies want to spend less on new products. However, I personally think the chances of no new budget iPad this year is pretty low, because basically since 2017 we've seen one new budget iPad every year, and of course, considering the iPad 10 is boosting Apple's market share significantly, they should capitalize on this and release another refresh that's going to continue increasing sales. And also look at what Apple's doing with their Macs. They're giving us a ton of simple spec refreshes that's going to easily boost sales while keeping the R&D cost to a minimum, so I can see Apple doing this with the iPads. And honestly, it's not too hard to predict what we can expect with the iPad 11. I think there's going to be two aspects Apple focuses with this refresh, and that's the SoC and pricing. First, let's begin with the SoC. So this is the simplest change Apple can give these iPads, and that's usually what Apple does with these base models. Remember, apart from the iPad 10, the rest of the budget iPads basically look the same for the most part, and so the chip is really the big upgrade we can expect yearly for these iPads, and so I think we can expect A15 with the iPad 11. Now I know there were some years where Apple kept the same chip on the new model. For example, the iPad 7 had the same A10 chip as the iPad 6, but do remember the iPad 7 had a slightly bigger display as the main upgrades, and so considering iPad 10 was a major design change, I'm sure iPad 11's gonna be a spec refresh. Also, logistically speaking, it makes sense for Apple to move to A15 because it's currently being used on a wide range of products like the Apple TV, the iPhone 13, the iPhone 14, as well as the iPad mini, so I'm sure it's going to be simpler and cheaper for the supply chain to allocate this widely produced SoC to the base iPads. Plus, the A14 is going to be likely out of circulation soon because once the iPhone 15 arrives, the iPhone 12 is going to be discontinued, and that's the only other device using A14 right now. So yes, instead of continuing to produce A14 for the base iPads, Apple would rather recycle a chip that's already being produced for a ton of other products, and that's the A15. Now some of you guys might be wondering, are we going to see the 5-core or the 4-core version of the A15 in the iPad 11? Well, if I were to guess, I'm assuming Apple's not going to be too generous, and they're going to stick to the 4-core version the iPhone 13 uses, just so the iPad mini does still have a slight performance advantage. Anyways, the next big change with iPad 11 should be pricing, and more specifically a price cut. Last year with the iPad 10, the price of the base iPads jumped from $329 to $449, and I thought this would put off a lot of consumers, but it clearly didn't. And so while there is a chance Apple does not change pricing, I still think we can expect a price cut. Why? Well, generally when Apple redesigns their base products, they do come with a price increase because of all the changes, but within a few years they drop back down to their regular price. Let's take for example the MacBook Air, the 2018 model introduced the current M1 design we're familiar with, but of course, back then this was a major refresh, and so the starting price was $1199, which was a steep increase over the regular $1,000 price point we come to expect for base MacBooks. However, in 2019, the Air dropped to $1099, and then eventually in 2020 it was back to $999, and we're already seeing Apple do this with the current MacBook Air, because the M2 also was originally $1199, but a year later it's now $1099, and should hopefully be $999 again in 2024, in which case Apple can finally discontinue the M1 Air that's currently filling that spot. Apple also did do a similar thing with the Mac Mini, where of course the M2 version got a $100 price cut. And so I'm pretty sure a similar thing's gonna happen with the base iPads. Yes, it's currently selling well at the $450 price point, but I'm sure Apple wants a lower starting price for the iPad range, and while the iPad 9 can currently fill that spot, they will have to eventually discontinue it. And so I'm sure, much like they did with the MacBook Air, this new design should come back down to the $329 price point the base iPads are known for. So I'm theorizing the iPad 11 is going to be $399, and then the iPad 12 drops to $329, and that would be a much better deal, and I can look past the drawbacks, like the lack of Apple Pencil 2 support. And so yes, while the iPad 11 and probably the 12 too won't bring big changes, these price cuts should be enough to continue increasing sales and Apple's market share for tablets. If we're lucky, we could also get new colors, but honestly, if there's one thing Apple got right with the iPad 10, it was the colors. The super bright, the vivid, and they stand out, and so I would not be too annoyed if they stayed exactly the same. Because ultimately, colors don't matter as much as a price cut. That's what's crucial with the next versions of the base iPads. And so yes, I'm looking forward to that and other small changes we get. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.